What up, y'all? It's your boy Kev on stage. Welcome to Ask the show where you get to grow, learn, understand, and educate. That's the what? That's the glue. Today, we are doing Ask a Black Doctor about the COVID vaccine. If you're wondering where Big Irish J is, he is not here today. It's for black people anyway discussion. Specifically black people in the medical community, and I didn't want to put Big Irish J in harm's way for someone to be like, why the white man in there? Listen to this, ain't got nothing to do with him. I love Big Irish J, and he was like, you know what, Kev, I appreciate that. So he'll be on the next one. With me, I have Dr. Reed Tuckson, and Dr. Reed Tuckson, just introduce yourself to the audience, and then we're going to get right to the questions.
Hey, well, first of all, Kev, it's great to be with you in the audience. I'm a physician trained in general internal medicine. I was a former commissioner of public health in the District of Columbia. I was a former president of the Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science, one of our 4 historically black medical schools. And I had a long career also in the private sector. So I'm really excited to be a part of this show and your audience.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Reed has agreed to answer everything that the streets is wanting to know. Black people, in my opinion, are hesitant about the vaccine in large part. And I believe that's rightfully so. I think we have a lot of, hey, man, what's up with this? So I want to know. I ain't got the vaccine yet. I know a lot of people are questioning whether they should get it. So we're going to get right to the questions. Dr. Reed, question number 1. Explain the full purpose of what a vaccine is and for us to understand the both sides of taking the vaccine or not taking the vaccine.
Well, vaccines are, of course, been in our world, thank God, for many, many, many years now. And we know that all of us have had the polio vaccine, the measles and mumps vaccines. And these are vaccines that basically, these are drugs that come into our body and train our body to recognize that there is a foreign enemy afoot. And it allows us to mount the army, the antibodies, to be able to attack the specific invader that is coming into our body. And so what it does is it teaches our body to says, look, when you see this invader, we are now going to mobilize the army and surround it and destroy it. And that is exactly what we want to have happen with this COVID pandemic and this COVID virus.
So if we don't take the vaccine, essentially, if our body gets the virus, it has to learn in real time while infected. Is that how it works?
That is exactly correct. And each of us is different in our response to that, to how we respond to that virus. As we have seen, and you know that we every day have to be so sad that so many more than 500,000 people have contracted the virus and died from it, that their bodies were unable to fight it off. Other people have been able to get who have been infected, have been able to handle it very well. And then there are many people in between. Particularly, there is a large number of people who we call long haulers, people who have been infected, recovered significantly, but still remain having secondary disease and health consequences as a result of it. So the point, Kev, is that there is a variety of responses that our human bodies, in a very unpredictable way, have had to this. But the one thing we do know is that the vaccines are extraordinarily effective at keeping us from getting really sick and or dying.
That's actually part of the, I'm gonna go a little bit out of order, Dr. Reed, if you don't mind, so we can like stay on the topic of the question. I think that's what a lot of people's fears are, and I know this is in here. From what we've all been taught, vaccines take a long time to study, get ready before they're out in the field. In my mind, I'm not a very smart man. I feel like I had never heard of coronavirus, COVID. So I'm thinking, oh, pneumonia vaccine took 9 years. Polio took this many years. This vaccine was available within a year, I feel like. I think we're just about to hit a year where we were quarantined. And I think part of people's fears are, how y'all get this vaccine this quickly? And I don't trust it. I don't even get the first iPhone. Dr. Reed, you want me to get the first shot and then you want to get me twice? Oh, why should I do that?
Well, I'm kind of glad you sort of raised that question, and I understand that people would ask that question, and it's very reasonable and legitimate to ask it. But just like you said with the iPhone, look how fast and quickly now every single subsequent innovation on your phone or your digital technologies, look how fast things are happening now. The speed of innovation, the speed of science is absolutely incredible. But what is important with this particular disease and this vaccine is that we didn't start from a standing start. That years ago, when we as a worldwide health community experienced the Ebola situation, the SARS events, we noticed that we were ill prepared as a world research and science community to respond. We had lessons to learn. We said, you know what we've got to do first and foremost across the world? We have to have a disease surveillance, an early warning signs to pick up new viral challenges. And so we did that. We created a worldwide warning system. As soon as this coronavirus was first identified, we knew about it, we found it, and then within 1 week's time, we were able to deconstruct the genetic code, the information that tells us what is this virus, how is it constructed genetically. We knew everything we needed to know about it in a week. Then we were able to take a prototype of something called messenger RNA. This is just a fancy term for a set of signals that are inside of a compound. We were able to take a prototype of messenger RNA that we already had available and then program that prototype to become a factory that would address the specific structure of this coronavirus. So all of that combined allowed us to move at a really rapid pace to be able to find vaccines that would deal with it. So yes, it was rapid. We should be excited about the fact that it was rapid. We should be very excited that the worldwide science community was prepared, it was organized, and it was competent to be able to produce vaccines that we now have learned are extraordinarily effective in record time. This is something not to be worried about or challenging. Something we ought to be excited about and feel great that actually mankind is pretty doggone smart when we need to be.
I listen, I'm learning a lot as we go, and we get to the next question, but I have one more question about the vaccine. I've been reading as much, but when you don't know something, I'd be like, I don't know, man. I've heard 5G and this was made in the lab, and how they get ahead of it if they wasn't already making it to give it to the people, and when you're unfamiliar, it's hard to weed out all that. But I did read something recently that part of the sped up process was the time in between trials is usually longer. And for this, because it was such a deadly virus and spreading so quickly, the time was compressed in between the trials. Is that true?
That is true. And it was done under very thoughtful conditions. So normally what would happen is we would test a new drug, a new vaccine, whatever. We would test it in a very small number of people just to make sure that it was safe and it wasn't going to result in death or serious harm. Once you've kind of passed that hurdle, then the second step is you enlarge the number of people that you study it with. And you're starting now to look and see what are the different doses, what's the right dose, and what are the consequences of different doses of that. And then third, you study it in a very large population of people, and so that you can really now be to have great confidence in the fact that the new vaccine or drug is effective and safe. What we did this time was to sort of run all three of those simultaneously, given the urgency of the problem and the threat to human life. We decided to run those sort of simultaneously, so they're happening all at the same time. That caused the process to go a lot faster. We are still, as the vaccine is still being administered to people around the world, we continue to study, continue to monitor, continuing to have very high vigilance to make sure that everything that we have learned continues to be true. So that is exactly right. It was done in a more fast forward way. It was done safely, it was done thoughtfully, and it was done responsibly. Let's not forget again that in this country alone, more than 500,000 people have died. We needed to move fast.
I get that, Dr. Reed. I'm going to go on to the next question. This is what the people are saying, Dr. Reed. Why should I trust the medical community that has historically treated Black people poorly? For example, the Tuskegee experiment. Could you speak to that for those of you who don't know about the Tuskegee experiment, and then answer the question of why should we trust the medical community?
I want to be very clear on this point, and all of my colleagues as Black health professionals, we are from the Black community. We are Black people. We are your neighbors. We are your friends. I am raising my Black sons and my Black grandsons. And so I am of and from the community itself, and I understand well why we have legitimate distrust in this country. So there's no fooling around about that. However, we also need to know that that distrust should not lead us to kill our own selves because we don't trust. The Tuskegee experiment is a very important lesson. It is a study that occurred in the 1930s, is when it began. And it was a study that took Black men who were known to have syphilis and to study the effects of that disease on their body if, in fact, that disease was not treated. The horror of that study is that in the 1940s, we knew that a drug that we all know now, penicillin, was extraordinarily effective at treating that disease. But those representatives in that study were not told that they were that there was a treatment, and they were not given that treatment. And so from the 1930s and 40s up until the 1970s, these men were followed to see what would happen to them, but they were left untreated. As a result, they got ill, they died prematurely, and they also spread that disease to others. The point is this: while we have every reason to be outraged at that, remember this: the reason that it was outrageous was that there was a treatment that would have stopped them from dying, and it was not given to them. I really hope and pray that no African American would be self-willing to know that there is a vaccine that will protect them from serious illness or death and decide to withhold it from ourselves. Not the white man holding it from us. We ourselves decide to do what the white man did to us in the Tuskegee syphilis study. That is extraordinarily important. And one other thing, Kev, which I think people really need to understand, that the 2020s and 2021 is not 1930. Back in those days, Black people had no power, had no authority. There weren't any Black people in charge of any of the research decisions that were being made for those Black men. Today, Black scientists are involved at every level of the process. The Moderna vaccine, for example, was created in large measure in Dr. Tony Fauci's lab with the leadership of Dr. Kismeti Corbett, a young Black researcher who led the team. And so this is very important. The people who are approving the vaccines for safety and effectiveness on that committee are two of my colleagues, African-American physicians and researchers who are reviewing it. So the point being that there is today a level of oversight and responsibility that did not occur back then. And the last point, Kev, that I really want to make sure we also understand is that there were significant changes made to the American requirements for research as a result of the Tuskegee study. And that change meant that there have to be what we call institutional review boards, a fancy way of saying review committees that have to review every single study that is done in this country. And on those review boards must be community-based people and people of color as well who are participating in those. So, Kev, the final analysis is today is not 1930. And please don't let anyone use the Tuskegee syphilis study as a reason to do to us what the white man did to us in 1930s.
I love you saying the white man, because I think the white man needs to know. Also, I think it's a point of clarity. There's a lot of confusion about the Tuskegee study. A lot of people believe they were given syphilis. And from what you said and what I've read, they already had syphilis and they thought they were being treated and they weren't. So I just think that's an important distinction for a lot of people out there, unless I'm mistaken, Dr. Reed.
No, you have got it exactly right. They were not treated. Treatment was withheld from them when we knew that that treatment would have solved their problem. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a treatment, a vaccine that would solve our problem that we should have access to, especially because we are being hospitalized 3 times the rate of others in this country, and we are dying twice as often. If anybody deserves to have access to a safe and effective vaccine, it's our community. And how dare anyone try to hold back our access to that which will save Black life? I have an undying love, Kevin, for Black people. And I am absolutely adamant about this point. We must have access to those things that will save our lives.
Listen, at first I was completely skeptical about the vaccine. Then when it was available in black and brown communities, where I live first, white people were sneaking in and getting it first. And I said, hold on now, shoot, hey, if it's bad, why y'all taking it from us? I don't want y'all to skip ahead of the line. One of the first times y'all got to wait. And now I'm like, I don't know about it. I feel like, you know what I'm saying? Just maybe it'd be okay because y'all ain't gonna problem taking it.
Hey,
okay.
Man, I can't tell you, Kev, how many times I've been on radio shows, talk shows, and whatever, and have black folks say to me, hey, you know what? I ain't gonna be no guinea pig, and I ain't gonna be first. Well, guess what, brother? You ain't first. And you wasn't gonna be first, because anytime in the history of the world, or at least our experience with white America anyway, anytime there is something that is in scarce supply but life-saving, guess who's gonna get it first?
Hey.
It ain't gonna be you. And so we need to really understand. And by the way, for those who decide that they don't want to be first and they're waiting for some others, let me give you a number to tell you: 275 million doses worldwide of these vaccines, 80 million people in the United States. So if you've been waiting for somebody else to find out what's going to happen, you got 275 million people who are already ahead of you in line, and 80 million people in the United States.
These people are already taking it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We got 80 million people in the US of A
have had at least one dose.
Wow. Okay, that actually brings up another question. A lot of people's fear is what I'll call the mesothelioma effect. People feel like, okay, I got it now. Boom, I'm good. I ain't get the vid in 2021 or 2022. But in 2032, my eyeball fell out. I'm watching TV and scroll down. If you took the vaccine in 2021, you may be entitled to compensation. How do I know that there's no residual effects of this vaccine that can't have been studied because everything's happening kind of in real time?
Well, brother, I took away my license to a crystal ball. And so I don't know anybody who can answer that question absolutely, that who knows what the heck would happen, 100 years from now.
Right.
I will say this vaccine has been studied intensely. And as I've mentioned, 275 million people around the world, 80 million in the United States, they're doing fine. And we are not seeing those problems. But we will always, and I can't underscore this enough, we will always be studying over time the impact of these things, just like we study every drug over time. Who knows with anything that we take that there could not be the theoretical possibility. But I would just say to you that one thing that is not theoretical over time, and that is this: 520 million people are dead from it. So you just play the odds.
520 million or 1,000?
Ratio here.
520,000 are dead, right? Not million.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I didn't mean, I apologize.
I was like, I'd have missed a number, Dr. Reed.
But 500,000 people.
Half a million people are dead.
And so my point being that, Kev, the risk-benefit ratio is very clear. The risk that you have of getting this disease and dying is so overwhelmingly more than any concern you may have about the vaccine that it really is a simple mathematics equation.
I think that's kind of what I'm kind of realizing in thought. If you say I'm not taking the vaccine, you are still at risk. It's not like if you take the vaccine, there's, of course, we don't know, you can have some risk, blah, 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 but at least you are more adequately protected from what you're saying. If you don't take the vaccine and you come in contact with the disease, you're still at risk. Extraordinary
risk. I mean, again, the numbers, 520, 500,000 people.
Yeah.
So remember that we've had the natural experiment. If you want to know, what will happen if I don't take the vaccine? Well, guess what? Black people, you will die twice as often as white people. You'll be in the hospital 3 times as white people. And the numbers are now well over 500,000 people. So you don't have to wonder what will happen. We know what will happen.
Yeah.
And by the way, Kev, let's remember this too. The virus that had been the cause of 500,000 people dying, that virus today is slightly different than the virus than we started out. The viruses that the virus has mutated, changing its character, is more transmissible and we think more lethal. And so
that brings up a great question.
That's very important.
That's the question that I have the strongest one. I'd love your answer. is the vaccine, or how well is a vaccine able or capable to prepare me for all these strains? I've heard about a UK strain, a South African strain, a Brazilian strain, and, certain places have all five. And was the vaccine made for the one that we, thought happened in October of as early as October 2019, but, February, March of last year? If it's for this one, how can it be prepared for the next one? And the vaccine's not as capable to handle the variants. Like, talk to me about that, because all this stuff, I'd be like, bro, I don't know nothing but nothing, and I don't trust the people telling me what to say. But I trust you, Dr. Reed.
You know enough to ask the right questions, and those are good questions. And there are lots of people in your audience who are asking that very same question. So here's what we need to know. Number one, it is a natural phenomenon of all viruses that they will mutate. They will change their structure as they go along the process of engaging with human hosts. They reproduce themselves. Sometimes when a virus reproduces, it makes mistakes from its original blueprint. It'll change the blueprint a little bit. That change in the blueprint could either make the virus less effective at infecting others or more effective. We are seeing that it is becoming more effective at being able to infect other people. So this natural change, which is not unexpected, is starting to happen all in this country and around the world. And we do know now that there are these viral variants pretty much prevalent. In fact, the one from the UK is doubling every 10 days and will probably very short order be the dominant strain in the United States. That is why, by the way, Kevin, I got to get this in. You've got to keep wearing your masks. You've got to keep doing the social distancing. You got to do all the things we were talking about because these variants are important. Now, will these variants find their way to be able to be to not be effective or to be killed by the various vaccines we have? To date, we are okay. We do see occasional strains where the vaccines may not be as effective as they had been, but still effective enough to do their job. But what we are in now, Kev, is a desperate, full-on sprint to the finish line. We have got to get enough people who are immune from this disease fast enough before these variants take over. That's why, again, people cannot be sitting on their hands, twiddling their thumbs, because the longer we wait to get what we call herd immunity, nothing but a fancy word, Kev, for being able to say that we have enough people who are vaccinated so that there is no more fuel for the fire to burn. We've got to take away that wood, get it out of the way so the bonfire blows out on its own. We're rushing to get there. We think we can get there by early summer, but it requires two things. Number one, when it is our turn to get the vaccine, get it. And number two, we got to make sure that adequate supplies are being available in our community. And these racist people who are trying to do voter suppression and other ways of harming our community, we got to make sure that those officials in charge of trying to hurt us in every way they can do not make decisions that say, hey, you know what? Black folks don't want the vaccine anyway, so let's take it and give it to the white community, because that's what will happen if we don't care, if we're not careful.
That's actually something I hadn't thought of. Man, that's actually like, I can easily see that happening. It's basically the same thing that happens in voter suppression, but in the opposite way. On that point of the vaccine, I've read that, and correct me if I'm wrong about the stats, Moderna and Pfizer are somewhere between 90 and 95% effective with the 2 doses, and Johnson & Johnson is somewhere around 65% effective. But with 1 dose, what does that mean to laymen like me? Explain to me like I'm 5. Why would a vaccine, which seems like a little over 50% feels like 50-50, and we don't know, man, just take it. 95% is like an A. So what does that all mean, Dr. Reed? I don't know.
So first of all, recognize that we need to focus on what we want the vaccine to do. Okay. And right now, our focus for these vaccines is to keep you, once infected, to keep you from becoming seriously ill or dying. What the 2 drugs, the 3 drugs that we have now, are extremely effective at keeping you from becoming seriously ill and dying. The J&J vaccine is 85% effective at keeping you from getting seriously ill and 100% effective at keeping you from dying, according to the data we have today. So that is extraordinarily important. The difference is that 65% is what they report in terms of you getting symptoms, not seriously ill, but symptoms. But the other thing you need to realize, 5-year-old Kevin, is that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines were studied earlier than the J&J vaccine. The J&J vaccines study populations came later with new forms of the virus, more significant challenges in our society during those times. And so it isn't an apples to apples comparison. It was different times. And so it's not really fair to judge those head to head like that. But at the end of the day, the take home message is this. What do I want that vaccine to do? I want it to keep you, 5-year-old you, from getting terribly sick and or dying. And all three of them do a terrific job at that.
Dr. Reed, I see why you finished medical school. I'm like, okay, man, I'll give him an A. Okay, the next question we have, how are other countries able to keep their numbers down without vaccines? Like New Zealand. I know New Zealand was the one I was the most jealous about. They had a doggone festival. And, obviously we didn't do that. What kind of things did other countries do that we didn't do?
One of the things that you learn, and I've had the privilege of visiting New Zealand, is that their culture is very different than ours. They have a very together, homogeneous culture, a culture where people work together. They have a culture where people believe that the relationship that they have as an individual to the other people who share their time and space is an intimate relationship. That how I live my life is important to how you live your life. They had that ethic, that social ethic there. Secondly, they got ahead of the curve and they didn't play politics. In the United States, the reason that we're having so much problem is because we had just the absolute worst possible person leading our effort. Number two, that we in America have so many people who have this weird philosophy that says my right not to wear a mask is more important than whether or not I can transmit a lethal disease to you. I could care less about you and care more about my right to have some individual authority not to wear a mask. We don't see that in some of these other countries that have been successful. This is a very weird way to view the world that says it's all about me. And although I know this disease, this virus can be spread to you in a way that I cannot see it, it is invisible. I can spread it to you even if I have no symptoms. But you know what? Even knowing that, I could care less about you. I'm not going to wear a mask when I go out into the community. I'm going to gather inside of bars and clubs. If you get sick and die, too bad. Good luck to you. So other countries have had a different cultural philosophy. They also implemented more intelligent thoughts. They are also, though, believe me, are going to want to have access to those vaccines as well. And they will, in fact, administer them to their populations.
That is the American way. I'm American. I can wear no mask. I saw a pastor this week. He said, if I get COVID and die, then I just die. I was like, what are you talking about?
And Kevin, look here now. See, that is so crazy because look here. If that was only true that you died, that's right. One thing. And I'd be really sad for you. And let me make sure that I'm not going to play light and airy with the death of any human being.
Right.
But it isn't about whether it's you will make me die. That's the problem.
My goodness. Okay, I actually got this question a lot, and I think it's a very good one. I would love to hear your answer. Essentially, does the vaccine affect the fertility or sterilization in men and women? I've had a lot of young people say, I want to get pregnant. I'm not sure. I don't want to take something that might put me at risk to not be able to have kids or have issues with pregnancy or complications as a result. Is there any part of that that's been studied, or is that usually studied within vaccine?
One of the things we have a lot more to learn, and again, people who do the kind of work that I do have to always be honest with our population. And as we say, what do we know? What do we think we know? And what do we need to know? We need to know more about this topic, and so that the studies of pregnant women are ongoing now. It is early in that, but here's what we do know. It does not affect your fertility. We'll start with that. Take that off the table.
Okay.
These vaccines do not affect your fertility. What we do know for pregnancy and catching COVID is that that women who are pregnant have a higher risk for bad health outcomes than women of the same age who are not pregnant. So we know there is a slightly increased risk. So we don't want people who are pregnant to be getting COVID virus. That is very important. We also have no reason now, in almost every case, we have no reason to say that a pregnant woman should not be vaccinated. We have no evidence that says that they shouldn't. And the guidance is check with your obstetrician gynecologist. We want you to have that conversation so you can evaluate the risk. We want you to evaluate how much of this disease is in your community. What's the likelihood that you will be exposed to this coronavirus? Because we don't want you to have bad outcomes if you get it. So you're looking at balancing the risk. We want you to talk to your doctor, but at the end of the day, the guidance from the medical community is there is no reason to withhold this vaccine from a pregnant woman.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reed. I actually appreciate you more saying what you don't know than being, you do this too, man. Just do it. Like I always appreciate a person telling me, I don't know, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna keep it 1,000 with you. I don't actually have the answer for that. Here's another question along the same lines. How safe or dangerous is the vaccine for those who struggle with autoimmune disorders or diseases who are already on autoimmune depressing medications?
Right. Very good question again. For people who have these kinds of serious health challenges and have obviously a relationship with their health provider, they should always check first with their doc. That being said, we want those people almost always to be vaccinated, because we want to make sure that we build up your immune system to be able to fight this off. Because if you are already in an immunocompromised status, you do not do very well fighting off this disease. Same thing for people with sickle cell disease, people with high blood pressure, people with pre-existing heart disease. Remember what we know for a certain fact, Kev, and that is this, that people with pre-existing health diseases have a much worse time fighting off this virus. That's why African Americans, in large measure, one of the major reasons why African Americans, in large measure, are dying more often than white people, because we have more pre-existing conditions.
Right.
We know all the reasons why that is. So when we have more pre-existing conditions, we now know that we are the ones that really need to be accessing that vaccine, because we're at high risk of not being able to fight it off. So almost all of these conditions, sickle cell, immunocompromised status, high blood pressure, heart disease, all those are reasons why we want you early in the line to get vaccinated.
Okay, that brings me to my next question, and forgive me, it's a little bit long, and I'm going to try not to stumble because I have a fat tongue and a lisp. The vaccine distribution is targeting areas with predominantly Black and brown people who are already experiencing high rates of the actual virus. Wouldn't these communities be closer to herd immunity and thus not need the vaccine as much? This makes me feel like there's something dishonest about how and why they're focusing so much on these communities.
Well, great. Thank you for raising it. Let's just deconstruct that very quickly. We are not being the ones who are targeted to get the vaccine. We are fighting to be able to make sure we have fair and equitable access, because we've had all these pre-existing conditions and other challenges. So the question has kind of got it a little bit backward. This is, no one is targeting us for it. We're going to have to fight for our turn at bat. Everywhere we are looking now, today, around this nation, where they are giving vaccines in Black communities, do you know who the people are that are gaming and jumping in line? It's white people.
It's them white folks.
It's white folks. So listen, folks, they understand that their survival depends upon getting this vaccine. And they are going to do everything in their power to make sure that every opportunity they have to get it, they will get it. So even coming for the first time in their lives, coming across Martin Luther King Boulevard. It's like, wait a minute, how'd y'all even know where we were?
Compton.
I've never seen you before. One of my sisters the other day told me she was up in New York, with Al Sharpton. He was getting vaccinated, and they were looking out over at the coffee shop adjacent to the center, and all these white women with fur coats on and jewelry all over their bodies were just waiting for the clinic to say, okay, we've got a few extra doses left because not everybody showed up, and they're ready to descend upon to get their doses.
Yeah.
So man, listen, I tell you, my brother, all of our brothers and sisters in the audience, you are not the ones being targeted. You're going to have to fight for your doses.
Man, looks like I've been thinking about this all wrong. It seems like the white man we're afraid of would love for us not to get it. Please be afraid of it. Let us have it. Let us take it because we want to be safe. And our previous fear is very valid then, but might not be as valid now. And we might be putting ourselves at risk when it could have been rectified. And I ain't gonna hold you, Dr. Reed. If I could take it, I'm getting it. I want to be a healthy boy. I'm just 37. I want to live long. I've heard of so many different long-term effects of people who've had it. Some people haven't had serious symptoms, but some people have had like brain fog where they couldn't think clearly for long stretches of time, or they don't breathe long. I'm already a heavy man. If I can't breathe long on the treadmill, I'm gonna be 380, and I'm already too old.
Hey, let me just tell you this, Kev, right quick too, because I think this is very important. Today's news is full of the opening, the governor of Texas and Mississippi, and one other state, about to open up their entire society.
100% no masks.
I mean, now guess what? Who are the people who are most at risk of dying because of that dumb decision? It's our people. It's us, because we're going to be the ones driving the bus and the subway. It's going to be us in the retail food stores interacting with that crazy population. It's going to be us cleaning the streets of those cities. It's going to be us going home to multi-generational families and spreading it to everyone. When our cities and towns and states open back up again and the white folk are fully immunized and we are not, what do you think is going to happen? Our small businesses are going to go under, our jobs are going to be lost, and above all, our kids are not going to be able to go back to school, and we're going to fall further behind. So we've got to understand what's at stake. They're going to get their communities vaccinated, and they're going to open up and have life as usual. We don't get access. We don't get vaccinated. We get sick. We die. We lose our jobs. Our industries go under, and our kids don't go back to school.
That's actually a fantastic point, and it brings me to my next question. Is the vaccine really necessary if all it does is prevent individual symptoms but doesn't prevent the transmission of the virus? I think you talked about that a little bit in our early conversation, but if you could just condense that for based on the point you were just making.
Well, no, it's actually, Kev, we need to add to what I've said.
Okay.
Because this is important. So what I said before is that what we now know, the data that we have, is that these vaccines are extraordinarily effective at keeping you from becoming seriously ill or dying. Now, we are learning more about whether or not these vaccines will stop the transmission from one person to another. We are hopeful that we will be able to report that before long. But right now, what we do know is that the vaccine does act to decrease the viral load, decreasing the amount of virus in your body, so that when you are talking, speaking, singing, yelling, breathing on another person, there will be potentially less virus going out, and that will hopefully stop spread from one person to another. But we have more to learn about that. And so the upshot of that, Kev, is that's why even when you are vaccinated, we're asking people, wear your mask when you go outside, because we want to make absolutely sure that even though you are protected, that you are not spreading virus to other people. I come back over and over again, Kev. If you love Black people, if you love human beings, if you have any ounce of radical caring about your people, if you care at all, you have no right to walk around among other people that you say you love and spew a deadly virus to kill or sicken them.
It's a fantastic point, Dr. Reed. You really in your bag today. I feel like you got a triple-double in this conversation. I appreciate it. Next question, and we got a couple more. We're going to let Dr. Reed go. What's the difference between being approved by the FDA and approved for emergency use?
So there is a very rigid standards, Kev, for how we evaluate the safety and effectiveness of any drug or vaccine. And that process, there are certain basic standards for that are no different from an emergency use versus a quote regular use. However, there are ways in which you can, depending on the nature of the crisis, you can speed up the process a bit and be able to demonstrate that the risk of not doing it is so much greater than the risk of doing it that they can speed it up even while we continue to study. So clinical trials that prove the safety and effectiveness of these vaccines are still going on. But instead of waiting and waiting and waiting for even more data, we have made a decision that it is appropriate under these conditions, especially given when more than 500,000 people are dying and we're heading towards, in very short order, 600,000 people who will be dead before long. We know that we need to interact. And so the calculus that is made is the risk of the disease is so much greater than the risk of the vaccine that it was approved. And I will say to you again, without any fear of anxiety or doubt, the process of approving this under the emergency use authorization was rigorous, meticulous, and closely observed and participated by Black scientists and physicians as a part of the overall structure.
Have you got the vaccine, Dr. B?
Absolutely. Got both doses. And I'm telling you, I ain't walking backward and I ain't got no third arm on my leg.
Put your boy in the line, man. Tell me, get your boy a little head start on a little situation, man. You know what I'm saying? I got
and I will say this too, Kev. I had a little bit of tiredness and a little bit of arm pain, and that was it for me. Some people have had chills, flu-like syndromes for for a few hours, maybe overnight, but then it goes away. Those symptoms are nothing more than your body responding to what it's supposed to do. It's revving up your immune system. So yeah, there could be some subtle things here and there, but at the end of the day, that is much more preferable than getting sick from the COVID virus.
I agree wholeheartedly. The next question is, how can I be sure if I get one company's vaccine that my second dose is from the same company? Does that even matter?
Great question. It matters. At least as far as we know now, it matters. And so we do not recommend that you switch brands in the middle. We want you to stay where you are, because right now, our science does not tell us that it is okay to go from one to the other. It may wind up proven to be over time, but today we can only speak to the American people based on what our science tells us for sure. And our science tells us for sure right now, stick to the ones you have. And how do you know? Because you get a little card when you go to be vaccinated. It tells you what it was, the lot dose, all that information is recorded. And so when you go back for your second dose, then they will know exactly what to do. And also because your audience, Kev, is smart. You are thoughtful. I mean, these are people wouldn't be watching you if they weren't smart. So They can remember whether they got the Pfizer one or the Moderna one. And so they know what they're doing and they know how to talk to their health professional, but it's all recorded in the data.
Got it. If I get the Pfizer vaccine this year, can I get the Moderna vaccine next year?
The basis of this question is, will we need to have booster doses or secondary doses as time goes by? And we don't know the answer to that right now. We don't know because we talked earlier about the variants, and it may be that the variants will come because if we don't get this bonfire, get the fuel out of the way so this bonfire has nothing to burn, we may see these variants start to take over that may turn out to be resistant to the vaccines. But as of today, we don't know the answer. You may need a booster dose or you may need a secondary kind of dose down the road. We don't know the answer yet, but that's why we've got to get to this herd immunity. 80% of the population needs to be vaccinated in a hurry. And that's why we're rushing against the clock.
That actually brings me to another question that I passed over, but fits better here. Why are people that take the vaccine so concerned about those who don't take the vaccine?
The reason that people who take the vaccine are concerned about those who don't is because they care about humanity. They care about what happens to the rest of us. people who are sharp enough to know that I've got to take this to protect me also care about other people. But also, as we know and indicate, that when people who do not take the vaccine have the chance to spread more variant forms of the virus, it could lead to the fact that their immunization, based on what they've taken, in fact, could become suboptimal, could be less than effective. And
Got
so
it.
that's why, remember the one lesson, Kev, that this pandemic has taught us: we are all in this together. There is no way you can escape being an intimate part of everybody around you.
Yeah, yeah. In your opinion, not necessarily medical opinion, but this is a lot of people's fear. The vaccine will become mandatory to work, to travel, or things like that. Do you think that is even possible? Do you think that's going to happen? What do you think are the chances of that being our reality?
Complicated question. Let's start with this. Talk about mandating a vaccine now is not going to be very effective at getting people to accept the vaccine. That if you're told you have to do it, I think it's going to cause an awful lot of pushback. And so I'm not in favor of that at all. However, and the second thing is, as you asked a very important question earlier, what is the difference between an emergency use authorization for a vaccine versus the regular traditional form of approval by the FDA? One of the major differences is that you do not have the legal authority as an employer or others to be able to mandate that someone have it as long as you're under the EUA. So that has some legal implications as well. But can you expect down the road that to get into another country that wants to that's got their disease under control, and they may demand that you show some kind of, not only your passport, but some kind of proof of vaccine? That is certainly possible, because different countries are going to react. Are there certain employees in certain job categories that this could be something that they would consider? It could be down the road, but this is not that moment. And this is not the moment to try to enforce those things. This has to be, to my way of thinking, something that we convince people to do voluntarily. Because as soon as you start saying government is mandating something, a whole bunch of people are going to decide, hey, then I'm definitely not going to do it. And the only result of that is we all going to die.
I really don't want to die. I just got a Maserati. I would love to be able to drive it. I've only been able to flex for months. I want that to be years. The next question is, does the vaccine affect women differently than men in any way?
Not really, no. It's been studied well, and good news is we're just human beings. Other than the pregnancy question, pretty similar.
Okay, I honestly think, Dr. Reed, we've answered the majority of the questions. I put this out to my Patreon. Actually, here's one. Well, you kind of talked about it, but I just want to make sure we say it clearly. Are you aware of any side effects outside of the arm soreness or anything like that? Is there any research on that?
Yeah, well, no, we're paying very close attention, and anyone who has in fact been immunized already knows that they are offered a little thing on your cell phone where you can respond to a query from the CDC every day or so after you've been vaccinated. And it asks you a whole bunch of questions about whether you're feeling tiredness, sick, chills, fever, all the symptoms that are associated with, or that could possibly be associated. And so it's monitored very carefully. There are some people who become more fatigued than others. There are some people who have more chills than others. But what we are finding after the number of people who have been vaccinated from this disease, that we are not seeing any serious significant issues. There were some issues early around allergies and allergic reactions. That has not borne out to be a significant problem whatsoever. However, when you go get your dose, they will ask you, have you had any serious allergies to foods or other elements? And if you say yes, then after you are vaccinated, they will ask you to stay in the vaccination area a little longer than the rest of us so that they can watch you carefully. And if there is an allergic challenge, it is a very simple thing to resolve by just giving you another shot of EpiPen, and you will be just fine with that. But this is not an issue that we are finding. And again, remember that we are at 275 million doses around the world, and we are not seeing alarm bells ringing about unsafe elements of any of these vaccines.
I do have one more question I forgot to bring up. We are just hearing in LA about potentially kids going back to school in April as they get ready to get all the teachers vaccinated. Some have to go back, some have the choice, things like that. But I haven't heard much talk about children getting the vaccination. Is that necessary? I've heard children don't catch COVID as much, but I don't know much about that. What are your thoughts on children catching the disease and vaccination for children? Because the school district hasn't said the kids have to get vaccinated in order to come back. They've just said that the teachers will be vaccinated and the kids will wear masks and social distance.
Right. Well, first of all, it is very important that our teachers have ready access to the vaccine, because so many teachers, and one thing that we've studied the data, the number of Black teachers who have pre-existing conditions is a very high number, as well as the number of teachers who live in multi-generational houses, particularly living with their elderly parents themselves. And so it is extremely important that we do not put our teachers, and let me hasten to add, our food service workers, our custodians in those schools, we should not be putting them in harm's way and making them risk not only their lives, but the lives of their family members by taking a disease home. So it's very important that all of those people are in the vaccine pool. But having said that, we have not had the opportunity to fully study the impact of these vaccines on children. Children are not little adults. They are very different. And so the current recommendations for access to these vaccines today, depending on which one you take, is that it is safe for kids 16 and above or 17 and above. So this is still being studied actively, and we have a ways to go before we will be able to have the science to, I've been speaking, Kev, very forcefully on certain points. I've been adamant about certain points, but as you've noted, when I cannot be adamant about a point, I have to admit it. And right now, we cannot be adamant about the effect of these vaccines on children. More studies need to be done, and those are in process today. We have a lot to learn. But you do ask, can kids spread the virus? Absolutely, they can, and they do. And can kids get sick from this pandemic? Absolutely, they do. And one of the things that we are seeing is a syndrome in kids that involves multiple elements of the child's body, multi-inflammatory syndrome, which affects multiple parts of the body. We're trying to understand more about which kids are at highest risk for that, but it is a serious issue. So no, do not walk around believing that children are immune naturally from this, that they cannot get sick or that they can't spread it to others, because none of those is true. All of those are true. They can get sick, they can spread it, and it's important that we recognize that.
I appreciate that, Dr. Reed. Before I let you go, is there anything that we didn't get to, or any kind of final points that you want to leave people with who are, who might still have some more questions, anywhere they can get more information? Just any final thoughts? I
would urge people to, first of all, consult their Black doctors for anything that you're unsure about. We as Black physicians have taken a pledge, an oath, and we said to our community, the first sentence of the oath is that we love you. We have an undying love for Black people, and you can trust us to tell you what you need to know. So please consult that. But the second thing I would say is this: I absolutely understand why we are distrustful of this society. I am of and from the community, and I get it. But the one thing I do get also is that I'm never going to let somebody who hates me and my reaction to that hate further kill me. I am not going to hand a sword to the Ku Klux Klan with my distrust and say, here, use this and kill me with it too. Mm-hmm. I am not going to be a complicit participant in my own destruction. If there is a vaccine that will save me and my family and my community, I'm going to take it and save my life. And I'm not going to let the agents and provocateurs, the Russian bots, the white supremacists who have invaded our social media, I am not going to fall for the okie doke. I refuse to let white supremacists create mistrust in our world that causes us to kill our own selves. Never will I stand for that.
Well, Dr. Reed, I appreciate you. I mean, you have answered literally every question that I had. You've answered a lot of the questions that my audience has had, and I think therefore a lot of questions that a lot of Black people have had. I appreciate you for not admonishing Black people for being distrustful of medical community, because even outside of Tuskegee, you talk about Black women in pregnancy and they have a high risk of dying giving birth, and Black people are not listened to by their doctors. Like, this is not all Tuskegee that has given us the, pause from the medical community. And I appreciate you for not saying, man, come on, man, it's okay now. Like, but at the same time, this is a risk thing either way you slice it. Whether you take it or don't take it, you are going to be at risk. So I love to at least have a more informed decision after talking to you now than I had prior to talking to you. People who are watching, please, please, please listen to what Dr. Reed says. This man gives me no reason for pause or concern. I feel like he has no reason to want to hurt me. I feel like he might invite me over for dinner. I feel like, I'm not sure, but I feel like
wear your mask.
Okay, I wear my mask. We can stay outside and have a cookout. You know what I'm saying? I ain't got to come in. But anyway, I appreciate you guys so much for watching. Thank you again, Dr. Reed. Is there a place they can follow you? I don't know if you're on social media or a website or
they can go to Black Coalition Against COVID.org, Black Coalition Against COVID.org, or go to blackdoctor.org, blackdoctor.org.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Do more research. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Thank you for watching. God bless you. God keep you. We'll see you at the conference.